Samaritans.
Okay.
All right, wonderful. Good morning. How are you? Good, good. I would like to start 1 week from now. I was told not to do this, but 1 week from now, it is my anniversary. Yeah. And I would like to just say happy anniversary to my wife. That is the ocean that I'm lost in these days. I want to thank her.
How many years?
Yeah.
How many years is it?
Don't put me on the spot.
How many years is it going to be?
Years. 15 years. Yeah. It's all an ocean. It's all an ocean. It's all flowing. Yeah. 15 years. Yeah. Could have been 18, but we'll talk about that later. We moved to Broomfield last year. It's been incredible. So at the same time, I would truly like to thank the Rotary Club. Some of the Rotary members are here, and I was embraced by Gary Francis and Lou as well, who embraced me and also told me I need to get my butt down to the Veterans Museum as quickly as possible, so I appreciate that. I just want to tell those of you who are from Broomfield, I mean, I'm really, really grateful to be here. We've never been in a community like Broomfield. We're on the Eagle Trace Golf Course, so we're looking at Main Street most of the day, just looking at the people. Initially, had to make a decision as far as where that service would go. For those of you who are servicemen and servicewomen, you know it's inside of you. It's something that never leaves. And after moving to Broomfield, I mean, I'm truly happy to be here, and I hope that my heart is able to serve the community in a way that shows the appreciation and gratitude we have for how we've been received. I'd like to talk to you about performing under pressure. And pressure, there's this thing about pressure. There's this thing about pressure, right? There are people who collapse under pressure, but there's also pressure that you have inside of you. I need to stand right, and there's pressure to stand in this little spot, right? So in the Submarine, I try to do my best, but I'm like a puppy. I wander around a little bit. But I want to talk to you about pressure. Pressure is what brings life to us. We're waiting for pressure to come into a baby's lungs for it to cry. Pressure is what we see leave the body in someone's last breath. Physical pressure, we tend to be able to see. What I'm going to talk about today on a submarine is emotional pressure. And as we have learned and as we continue to pick up, humans have been incredible escape artists, concealers of pressure and what they're dealing with. On a submarine, some of the strongest people in the world, as far as I'm concerned, are able to deal with the emotional stress of being out there in the ocean and dealing with their families, and they internalize it, but still, that pressure exists. And I'm going to talk to you today about my experience and how we dealt with some of that pressure and how we use some of the negative pressure to create the positive energy to let us know that we're always going to find our way back to the surface no matter how deep things get to be. My story is, I'll go through it quickly. I graduated in early 90s, 1991, and went to college right away. Those were the rules of my family. You go to college, you're going to go to school. So I went to college. Not necessarily going to classes, but I went to college. I was having the time of my life. Okay, I was having the time of my life. It was amazing until I realized that I had to go to class. And I had this conversation with my mother 2 years in, and she said, you know what, the cost of a C is the same as the cost of an A. I had the slightest idea what she was talking about. She said, what happens is I give 100% money and you give me 70% results. Where's my 30%? See, I wasn't going to math class, so I decided to do what she was talking about. If I went to math class, I would have understood it. She wanted to talk about that ROI, that every time you go in, I'm paying 100%. When you're coming out with 80, what you're telling is a company, you're cementing in a college degree, the 100% you invest in me, you're going to lose 20% of it, but I'll give you 80% back. She said, I want 100%. So, as any ignorant teenage kid would do, I said, fine, I'll pay for it myself, and decided to go back down to college on my own money without a job, right? I was cooking wings or something like that at the time. I find out how much college costs. So, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. I start walking down Court Street in Athens, Ohio, and things start floating in my head, and there's actually a recruiting station, a Navy recruiting station, right at the end of the street. I walk into the recruiting station, and all I could think of, because I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, a place called Shaker Heights, was the Blue Angels. That's what I grew up watching, the Blue Angels. I grew up, off the coast of Lake Erie. Being a Navy guy, Lake Erie isn't necessarily a Navy port, but still, just seeing the Blue Angels, I just thought there was nothing like the Navy. My mom told me I was so in love with them that in Christmas she would buy me toys and gifts and different things like that, and I would cut up the cardboard in the boxes and paint them and draw Blue Angels and put sticks in them and just have these Blue Angels fly around. So I tell the guy, I'm ready to fly. He looks at my GPA because I've been goofing around in college for 2 years. He's like, I don't know if you're ready to go in the air just yet. But if you're feeling that sinking feeling, I know a place where you'll be a little bit comfortable, right? So I said, sure, sign me up. And I went into the world of submarines. One of the things that was really interesting at that point in time, how in the world did this kid make it to that spot? And there's actually a video that I was going to show. If you search online, The Ultimate Guide to Submarines, this is me at the 12-minute point. I signed up for Navy submarines and decided to turn my life around. My college experience had been unique. It wasn't just having fun, but I was focused on camaraderie. I got involved in a fraternity. So I started getting my arms around, certain people, but I was definitely off track from where I needed to be. I needed to turn my life around, and the only way I could turn my life around was to change me, the person. I needed to be a different person. I went in, and as soon as I went in, I became a leader. For those of you who have been to boot camp, you know those rooms of 100, 120 people. Because I had been dealing with so much stuff from the situation in college, it just wasn't a problem for me. I could do push-ups, I could deal with whatever hardship, it wasn't a problem. But what I started to find was a love and appreciation for the struggle of other people. It was the first time I had been in a room with about 100 people, and all you could hear is the breath. You don't hear people's names, you don't hear people's voices, no one's special over anyone else. All you hear is the breath. And because you're not supposed to be looking around, all you could do is just see the drips of sweat coming off of people's foreheads as they're doing push-ups all the time. I became an RPOC. My parents were able, which is a recruit petty officer commander. My parents were able to see this guy who was just kind of hanging around, not doing everything that he should. For those of you who know the 90s were the 90s, so I was loving Biggie, Tupac, hip hop, and everything that the 90s had to bring, right? But I had to change to become something different, to tell my mother that the investment that you put in me, I can give you back 100%. On the way home from boot camp, I was going to see my grandfather. I was in my Navy uniform. It had never been seen before. I wanted to show my family that this was a different guy. This isn't the guy with the hat to the back and the pants sagging, stuff like that. This is a Navy guy, honor, courage, and commitment. I was in my uniform and I was ready, and the craziest thing, a suspect who had stolen a vehicle was in a police chase. I still to this day do not remember it. I remember I stopped by my grandfather's house. I knocked on the door to see if my grandfather was there. He wasn't there. I left his residence, got down to the end of the street, took a left, and then I woke up in the hospital. This missile, right? This is the actual seat of the car. I still have some of the scars to show it, but the car was T-boned, and I was knocked into the back seat of the vehicle. Completely lost my memory, but really didn't know what to say. The unique circumstances, if you think about what I was going through at that point in time, every time I woke up, I was in the barracks. I wasn't home, I was in the barracks. So there was so much Navy that was imprinted in me, honor, courage, and commitment. That is the character that went into that car accident. I was at home in Cleveland, back in the place where that former guy was. So when I wake up from the car accident, I'm dealing with, am I this honor, courage, and commitment sailor? Am I this person of integrity who I really desired to be? Or am I still this guy in Cleveland? Was boot camp enough to get me through it? My jaw had been broken in 2 places, my collarbone was broken, my hip was cracked. I basically was broken in half in the back of this. My jaw had plates in it from the breaks. And I told my mother, I need you to send me back. And she said, physically, she had already called the base. They said, you need to rest here physically to be able to recover. And I explained to her, physically wasn't the problem I was dealing with. It was who I am. It was my values. It was my beliefs. And if you leave me here, if I amend myself physically in Cleveland, I'm going to start seeing the reflection of the person who I was. Because the clothes I had was the clothes that that person wore before he put on the uniform. And the only uniform that I had was the one that had gotten cut off from the car accident. I rushed back to base. Because I am transferring from base to my Navy facility, no one knew who I was. So the aspect of me dealing with amnesia and all these different things, no one knew it. I didn't know anybody at my base. I was transferred from one to the other. So somehow, and it's all documented, I am dealing with a case of amnesia, and I return to the Navy base. Sometimes people say a knock in the head is good for you. With that memory being gone, I was paranoid learning and just passionate. I was scared that I couldn't learn. I was scared that the things that qualified me to get on the submarine, I was no longer available for. And at the same time, if you think about this, if you think about my mindset, I felt like I needed to back away from everything and get out to sea. I felt like when I got on the submarine, I would figure everything out. I go to school, I invest, I'm getting better. I'm not gonna say that after the car accident things were great, but I'm getting better. We would learn from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock in the evening. 7 o'clock in the evening, the guys would go eat, I would stay. I would stay and study. Our materials were secured, so you had to stay inside the facility to get myself better. Before the submarine departed, I actually got on the submarine 2 weeks before the submarine departed to study it, to understand it, to make sure that I was going to be a strong asset. The most important thing for many people getting on the submarine is dolphins, the Navy warfare pins that this gentleman has on his hat here. I couldn't think of anything else in the world that I wanted more than that. I did have a family at home at that point in time, but left to get on the submarine to do what I could to learn. 2 weeks out at sea, I became the fastest qualifier of Navy warfare dolphins. It took me 2 weeks. The process was going around talking to people, and I would say that is the most powerful thing, one of the most powerful things that I experienced. If you just think about where I was, at that time I was 23 years old. In the submarine, in order to learn, you're going to people and they're telling you. You can't just have books anymore. In college you have books, you can look this stuff, you have to click it. On a submarine, I have to go talk to this person, and I need to go in that person's area. So I'm not going to say it was like hazing, because it really wasn't. But you have to show a sincere degree of respect for what somebody is doing, understand their level of expertise, and then they pour into you. And that feeling of people teaching me is what changed my overall mentality. And this is me as a strategic weapons supervisor. I had 5 patrols on strategic submarine, USS Kentucky, 737 Blue. My total time away from sunlight is, I guess, roughly about 15 months. I became the fastest qualifier for strategic weapons. My captain, who I just flat out loved, if he called me today, it'd be like the movie The Rock. I'd follow him anywhere. Took me off of the submarine after 5 patrols and took me to the learning center with him.
What
and
is
said,
the panel you're looking at?
Yeah, and thank you for that. Please, I hope this is a coffee conversation thing instead. So if you have questions, please just interrupt me at any time. This is the nuclear weapons panel. And the submarine is moving forward. 6 hours. So our watches would be 3 watches of 6 hours each. 6 hours I'm looking at that panel. If someone went down, then we would be port and starboard, so I'd have to sit 12 hours. And someone else would sit 12. For those who understand the panel, I can't leave that seat. These are my babies. I have to watch those 24 missiles no matter what. I have to watch the humidity, I have to watch the pressure, I have to watch everything that's going on. So if that call ever comes, yes sir, we're ready. Yeah, thank you for calling. We're ready. We're ready to go. Right? This person over here manages the fire control and the targeting to make sure that everything works together. For those of you who want to get down into the details, like all the navigation, the gyros, the spin up, all the star navigation happens here. But as far as actually unlocking the tube, these are all the different types of pressure mechanisms. When we practice with air. When we launch with nitrogen. Right? And just a really cool thing, do people know why we launch with nitrogen? It's kind of cool. When a missile launches underwater, when it's pressurized with nitrogen, the theory is that the missile doesn't get wet. Okay, so when it's really cool. The hatch will open. There's kind of a shell that covers the missile itself. When it feels that missile come off the like the limit switch or the indicator, when it feels the missile rise, explosives will allow that to burst open. When it bursts open, the pressure of the tube with the nitrogen inside will rise at the same time as the missile. When the missile gets above the water, it's about a 2-degree tilt. Psst. If it tilts anyway, it fires.
Do they tilt the sub before they fire?
No, sir. No, sir. Great question. Great. It's very, very critical that the sub stays level.
Nitrogen is probably to keep the weight down.
Mm-hmm.
It must be very shallow too when you're firing, right?
Probably not the best thing to talk about on video, but we're in the right spot to do what we need to do. So we'll go ahead and go to the next one. So I just want to cover this just to say, I fell in love with this entire experience because of what it did for me. Let me end this story quickly. So as far as like my story, so I could go into the details of what I want to talk about. I always go too long with it. After I finished my qualifications for 2 weeks, I just became very, very hungry for learning. My C-pup became the second fastest qualifier because I taught him how I learned the submarine, which is just literally drawing it. Here are the pipes, here's this, here's that. And for those people who, submarine qualifications are very, very stringent. If they ask you about a certain valve, you have to say, okay, this is where that valve is. Where is it on your body? It would be around my knee. How many times would you have to turn that to open it? Very, very detailed questions about the submarine because we have to do damage control, potentially.
In the dark.
In the dark.
And smoke, maybe.
And smoke. Yeah. So when you're talking to the captain, Gary's back there smiling because they would do that. So they would ask you, how do you do it? From here. I take 37 steps. I go through that portal. After that portal, I have to duck through. I have to inform the camp, the monitor, and the people who are standing guard here of this thing. Then I have maybe about 20 seconds to make it there. I need to plug in just in case smoke, so I have oxygen. That oxygen will hold me for about 40 seconds. I can go through the next compartment, make it into the engine room, and by that time I can start chaining people. You know, it's very, very detailed. But here's the thing, which is really cool. Everybody thinks that you wouldn't be able to be on a submarine, and I think most of you can. The reason being is because you compare a submarine to this current environment. When we close the hatch, it takes some time, but things change because there's no sunlight. So your body doesn't have that demand speaking to you of it's day, it's night. And you see the same environment over and over again. Your brain says, okay, I got it. That's a wall, 37 steps, I got it. And it starts calculating, memorizing all that information. And when you start talking to people on the boat, it's nothing like a submarine. You're talking at such a high level of intelligence. Oh, that's on page 37. It's like the second paragraph down on page 37, that manual. You just start memorizing the environment and it almost gets larger. So it's really, really cool being inside a submarine. I did manage to fulfill my mother's promise. And not only did I go back to college for straight A's, I actually retook them, because I had time on a submarine. So if I had a B, I went back, retook that B, got an A, and I graduated with associates, bachelor's and master's degrees, all with 4.0. I think my bachelor's might have been like a 3.8 or 3.9. But really focused on making sure that I gave her what she asked for. I moved into education myself. My master's degree is in instructional technology, and I went to the Trident Training Facility for learning. And from my knowledge, I became the first instructor who was nominated Instructor of the Year for 2 years in a row. So my focus is really learning with my mother's background and all the different things that I went through. And it's my passion. What I want to share with you today is a little bit of a thesis. Any questions about my story before I jump into some of this thesis? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, in World War II, the submariner, the crewman on the submarine had to know everybody else's job.
Mm-hmm.
Like the bow plainsman had to know what the torpedo man did. Did you find that true in the nuclear school?
100%. 100%. And thank you, because you probably remind me of the most important point. I became a lay leader. It isn't necessarily a religious role. Not only would I want to know where people are functionally, I had to know where people were emotionally. And this is where this presentation kind of crosses to where we are today. I spent time in human resources when I moved into the corporate environment. And when we talk about our society day, where all these different things are happening from an unsuspected standpoint. Oh, oh my God, all these violent things. It's so critical that we find a way to use our sonar to understand where the pockets of pressure are so we can start to release those before they kind of violently erupt. As the lay leader, when I started, it does have a religious connotation to it. We had a guy in boot camp who was just focused on scripture every time we were doing push-ups. So it really got into me. And I was both, because I was raised Catholic. I was a Catholic and Protestant lay leader. But I told my wife it was really interesting. By the time my submarine career ended, I was just of the mindset to help everybody where they were with what they needed, regardless of what they believed in, because somebody challenged me on it. It was probably my second or third patrol, uplifting everybody I can, pushing, read, cover to cover, all these different books. But I found that I was trying to get people to focus on where my beliefs were. And on a submarine, you got to keep everybody up. No one can be isolated. Everyone needs to be 100%. And the reason I'm passionate about that, not just in a submarine, but as a society, is we can't replace people. So even if you hate someone's guts, I need that person to be 100% regardless of how I feel about them, because they turn a valve that I can't get to if a fire happens here, all right? Their wife, their life, whoever they're missing, that's none of my business. My focus is to do the best that I can to support that person and make sure that they have the mental capacity to do what they need to do. And then when they make it back to shore, they'll reach their base. It's not me. I'm not in, their home base. They'll reach their base. My focus is to make sure that everyone makes it. That's how I feel about this room. That's how I feel about the society. That's how I feel about the school across the street from where we live. Want to make sure that everybody makes it, because it's difficult. Everyone will have a very have a hard day. Thank you for asking that question. Was there another one? I promise to answer the next one shorter.
Tight quarters for weeks or months at a time, the claustrophobic aspect of being in a sub for that long, is that basically weeded out of before one gets assigned to a sub, or do some people bounce off the walls as a result?
I think it was incredible mentorship. I've been asked that question. I don't remember any tests. Maybe Gary or my colleague here can remember that. I don't remember a test of can you stay underwater for 30, 60, 90 days. One thing you start to realize is when the hatch closes, you've got some decisions that you can't get out. Or we tell people, if you want to get out, you can either go through the tube, or you can swim to shore, but you got to make it up first. Right? If you make it to the surface, that's the hard part. Making it to the shore, it takes you some time. Go ahead.
Archie, I'd say that probably the one discriminating activity that the submarine force does before you go to a submarine is, at least in my case, they put you in an 8-foot-long tube, pressurize it to 40 feet, and open a hatch, and you go up a 40-foot water tower. And during that pressurization time, that's when claustrophobia is going to show up. They do a lot of psychological evaluations before you get to that point. But all you have to do is raise your hand while they're pressurizing that 8-foot tube, and you can leave, and you'll be assigned to a surface ship or a submarine support ship. So
Gary,
I had 21 years in the Navy, most of them on submarines, and I had one guy complain of claustrophobia, and it was because he was lazy. He didn't want to be there. And that's a great thing about the submarine force. It's all voluntary. So if you don't want to be there, all you have to do is say, hey, I don't want to be here. And they'll assign you to a submarine support surface ship. So that was a great thing, I thought. And I got there in the 70s. And it was a much time frame, a different time frame than what our team went through. But it was, we had guys that were basically impressed into the Navy that volunteered for submarines, and they ended up staying in those cases.
And from a relationship standpoint, when Red Cross will come in sometimes in movies, what they show is the military or service people knocking on someone's door because someone's been lost at service. What they don't tend to show is what happens when it goes the other way. And on submarines, when Red Cross will come in, you have the ability to say whether you want to know while you're out at sea, or just let me know when I get back to port. But one of my key responsibilities per process was to talk with people and work with people who had lost people at home and help them until we get back to shore and have that conversation. Can you still man your station, right? I would be able to have those conversations no matter how long it took. We could talk for days, we could talk for months. Tell me about your sister, tell me about your sister's dog, and just help people get through. And that's where it wasn't just a passion thing where I'm going around, hey, how are you? How are you? How are you? Right? But I was somebody who was responsible for helping people manage pressure. And Gary, if it's okay for me to say this, I'll go ahead and say it. If the pressure gets to be too much, we take you off the station. If your pressure in any way gets to be physical on a submarine, you'll cause a nuclear violation if you get a little bit too out of pocket. If someone feels that they can't control themselves physically and the anger gets out, because we're in a nuclear submarine, quiet in the middle of the ocean, so if you want to make some noise, there's certain things that we're going to have to do to secure you. We take other measures to secure somebody safely, non-violently but securely. Be the best way to describe it. Yeah. I mean, it's tough, but I mean, if somebody just has those things and you go there, you talk to them, you kind of help them deal with it. But I would say it's not a matter of strength, just the conversations I've had. I had a conversation which was probably the most difficult with the service person. I know there have been some tough presentations over the past few weeks, so I have no problem saying this. He lost 4 family members. From the time the first one was informed to the time we could get him back, he lost 4 family members, and it was only a week. It was all kind of compound stuff going on, and just dealing with that conversation, talking to, RT, you need to blah, blah, blah. Captain, what do I say to him this time? I don't know, figure it out. So it's that emotional relationship of being with somebody where I think on the surface you don't get that. Like if this was a conversation between you and I, it would be so focused because I know I can't call my wife, right? So it really gets into this, can you help me deal with it? And for me, I can't say enough about the service people. When they talk about veterans and, there are suicide issues, but the strength of service people for me turned my life around. I served with some very, very good people who put their arms around me and just told me. I was looking at magazines, I was looking at the news. You can't look at that out here. Things that were brought on board before we took off. We don't get news, magazines, internet, things like that on the submarine, right? So all that's locked out. But how it was explained to me, I read something about like a genocide in Africa, and I was depressed and I couldn't pull out of it. And they explained to me that negative thoughts in a submarine don't have the friction to slow it down. Nothing's going to stop it because nothing will deny it. All you have is that piece of information that this is what's happening. You're not going to get another newspaper clipping. You're not going to go to the internet. And your mind continues to carry that thought. You can't talk to your wife, your sister, but it continues to carry that thought. So again, I was very, very fortunate to have guys who were, get out of your rack. Come on, we're going to walk it around. Why are you looking all, who would make sure that you're up at a certain level, that we need to make sure that you keep your energy high and lifted. And the best analogy I can give is there's a difference between a sunny day and a cloudy day and how you emotionally react to it, right? On a submarine, the weather are the emotions of the people, right? Like my father could bring a storm into the home when we were younger. And even if he wasn't in the same room, you're just like, oh man, okay, there's thunder over there. You stay quiet, right? Something's going on. And it's the same thing in a submarine, you feel it. Like, what is that? And you just start moving around until you find those pockets and places and release them. But it's very, very important that we always keep things at a high level of collaboration. So there's never anything that slows down. If you tell me something, if Gary's giving me an order, there's nothing in here that's going to slow down my doing it. I'm not taking it personal or anything. You can say it to anybody you want to. What do you need me to do? Pow! And we go and do it. Yeah, good questions. Any questions, comments for? Okay. This structure of emotional depth, and I want to kind of tell you how the theory came about, where technology is growing, the rate of technology is growing, and the rate of information. So if we were to look at where we are today from where we are 50 years from now, after I left the Navy, I went to work for a company for 3 years. I did online learning for, my main customer was called CATSNF, the Center of Anti-Terrorism and Navy Security Forces. So I worked on projects such as how we perform harbor security after the bombing of the USS Cole. And also I did online training for how we moved enemy detainees from across the sea to Guantanamo Bay. After 2004, I would say the majority of people who went through Great Lakes or went into the Navy, if they learned something online regarding a weapon, it's a very good chance that I was the one, at least the project manager, who led that. After leaving that company for 3 years, I went to work for GE Aviation in Cincinnati, which is where my wife and I were before we moved here. And it was at GE Aviation, at a human resource manager, when I started to encounter certain workplace violence things and just really understand that, you know what, I think it's tougher on the surface than it is on a submarine, just the amount of stuff you're dealing with. On a submarine, you go down underwater, you come back up, what's changed? It's pretty much the same thing. But on the surface, you're constantly dealing with information. So I started studying it. I started looking at, if I talk to people the same way that I talk to them on the submarine, would this help from a pressure standpoint? The way that we manage pressure on a submarine, would this be able to help people manage pressure in their own lives? And I found out that it could. One of the things that we're dealing with that a lot of people don't talk about is I could give you 50 words 50 years ago, and I give you 50 words today. Those same words carry more emotional weight today than they did back then. So when we talk about how much information you're carrying in your mind, how many things you're remembering, today we also tend to carry the emotional attachment to them. Like I could start throwing out words and you guys, okay, here's the definition of that word, but you're probably going to get feelings from the different words that I throw out. That creates emotional pressure within us and across our society that we weren't dealing with years ago, the constant swirl of pressure. And my response to that and my solution to it is that we can effectively manage pressure just like a submarine if we're moving into uncharted difficulties, but if we cannot control the external pressure, we've got to control it internally. And what I use are different types of methodologies that I learned on a submarine and how we can use those methodologies in our own life to control our ability to rise and dive in our own lives. What do I mean by that? Well, I might need to dive deep, not for me, but I might need to dive deep because someone else is dealing with the struggle. And what I've shown in this current emotional depth, expression, suppression, regression, and depression. A submarine deals with crushed depth when it's getting down to a point where the pressure outside the submarine is greater than the pressure inside, so you would deal with an implosion. I equate this to depression, where people are dealing with so much pressure in their lives they don't find a way out and they just can't escape it. The strength of people who are able to deal with pressure are the people who are able to get to the surface, but I can dive down and deal with someone who's depressed. I could dive down and deal with someone who's regressed away from a situation. How does this line up? Expression, I'm out, I'm creative, I feel free. Suppression, and this happens, this is kind of like a workplace thing. Suppression, these are people who are quiet. They're still there, right? Right beneath the surface of the water. A teen in your home. Yeah, Dad. Well, tell me more. I'm suppressed. Regression is when the suppression moves to someone who's to someone, I'm going to go in, I'm going to close my door. I'm going to stay in the bathroom, stay in my room, be in the basement. Regression, you just don't see these people anymore. And because they don't get touched as much, they get into this area. In a submarine, we have to have visibility of people, so we start watching out for these type of things, and we want to make sure that everybody is there in that expression area. If you translated this to police work, if you translated this to school work, again, you're going to want to see everybody here on the surface and try to avoid being in these areas or be mindful of those areas. Let me give you one example. Good example. Funeral. Okay. Most people, if they have a loss in the family, start to go through pre-pressurized situations to prepare themselves for I'm going to go into a situation that's going to be a little bit tough. So let me kind of get my vows, marked in so I can deal with my own emotions, but be able to deal with somebody who's dealing with something difficult. All right? Any questions about this before we go on? So the purpose here, and I'll push through some of these you already know. But the purpose, vision, mission, vessel, and log just really focuses on people out at sea understanding, like, what's it all for? What's the purpose of us being out here? I'm sure for the veterans, you've probably heard that if you don't know or if you don't lock in to why you're doing it, if you're out there, you're going to get lost. Before I got on the submarine, the night before, I was nervous about going in. I wasn't sure if it's what I wanted to do. You know, conscience, I had so many things going through my mind. And the captain told me, he said, you know, if you really want to ensure that lives are safe, then you should be mindful that it would be you sitting at that panel. You need to get on the submarine. Everything going on through the U.S., at least, you know, in 1996 was flowing through my head at the point in time. And one thing I realized, and I'm not a political person, I'm apolitical, but one thing I realized was, for me, I had to do it for everybody. I had to say that my service was for my view, my desire, my dream of what America was to me. And it couldn't be selective where I'm going to do it for this, I'm going to do it for that, I'm going to do it for this, I'm going to do it for that. I'm going to have to do it for everything that that flag stands for. And that's how I feel for it today. Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. I serve for all of it in hopes that it's going to reach a greater good at some point in time. And I still feel that way today. And I feel, I mean, it's my responsibility to serve. From a purpose and, from a purpose, vision, and mission standpoint, with purpose, we're really just trying to help somebody create a foundation. Some of the things that you're seeing are probably more school focused or more work focused than it might be military, but really helping somebody get a foundation. How does this stuff work for people out at sea? Why would you have a conversation with people out at sea? Is because you can start to get lost in your values. For me, probably because of the car accident, I was very, very locked in on honor, courage, and commitment. Has anybody ever heard of the movie The Four Feathers? Yeah, it's a military movie about a person who's branded a coward. So he goes through all these things to make sure that he could prove himself. And because of the failure I had with my mom, I was so locked in just being a sailor of honor, courage, and commitment. So this became my purpose. We make sure that people have a base so they don't get lost at sea. With the vision, it's how do we find ways to translate your vision through the channel, meaning the things that you want to do in life. How do you make those happen? What we found is that there are many people who have dreams, who have desires, who have purpose, but they don't know how to move their purpose into a position where they're in the open ocean and they can start to command, patrol for the lives and the things that they want to do. So this is a process as well. And in mission, it's just making sure that everybody understands that you have a cycle, not just goals, but a mission of things that you can accomplish, things that you want to accomplish, and things that by accomplishing will bring a sense of fulfillment. The vessel, and here are the things that show an alignment. Position, patrol, power, propulsion, periscope, ping and pulse, and positive buoyancy. It's how I position the book, but many of these are human behavior attributes. If we talk about influence and impact, vigilance, discipline, energy, drive, productivity and results, perspective, awareness and discernment, emotional balance and resilience. These also align, if you've ever heard the book, The Habits of Highly Effective People, right? So I'm really not bringing anything new. What I try to do is almost provide an analogy and methodology to introduce these principles through a submarine and show how they would do it. I'm not going to take long going through each, and what you see is kind of a coaching mechanism of where are you from a position standpoint, where are you from patrol, where are you from power, and when done right, I believe that it gets people a little bit higher to the surface of their lives, and that's my focus. Are you stuck in that area of regression, or do you feel like you're at the surface? So these next pieces I'm going to quickly go through, and then we'll stop, just see if there are any questions or comments. Position is really people understanding where they are in life. And the thing about position, why I think it is challenging, is in a submarine position's everything. We're not using active sonar. We don't have windows. So for us to know where we are, we have to understand our position. It's critical. If you hear of a SWAT team, are people in position? Are we in position for our lives? Are people in position to receive the results that they're looking for? Sometimes it's positional. Sometimes someone has everything that they need to make it, but you're not in the right position. And one of the things I cover in the book, and you'll see it for those of you who have it, is a lot of it's relative. If I talk about a current position, I can say, I'm 20 minutes to your house. Or I could say, I've been on the road for 40 minutes and I'm still coming. Or I could say, I'm at the intersection of this. And there are different ways that we can identify what the position is in our life. And it's critical that we put ourselves in a positive position. A lot of times, this position, getting this wrong, is what hurts so many people in society because they believe that they're in a position that they can't get out of. So with position, what I do is I provide 5 things, and from principle to practice, what I did was identify, here are 5 principles, but here are certain things that we can start doing today to give more control over our ability to operate our vessel. Like I said, the ocean's crazy. We know the ocean is crazy of life, but we can control the vessel of who we are to be able to rise and dive when we need to. The patrol, once position has been established, it's critical to commence a continuous patrol to secure and control the operational area. Patrol is just about being active. Patrol is about, if you want to have a career in art, what are you doing? What are you drawing? How are you getting out there? Are you patrolling? Are you on your purpose? How much are you touching it? A submarine is constant. We're just out there patrolling. But if you have certain things in life that you desire, if you have certain things in life that you want, how much are you patrolling it? What are your routines? What are your habits to make sure that you're pulling this thing into your life? And this helps channel your vision, close the hatch, clear the minds, create boundaries, and commit to constant overwatch. And these 5, I just love the tips here and some different things. If there's one that I could give for you today, just scheduling time and space for focus is awesome. It's hard, right, to just keep on flipping through the channels, and I think the one button I need to hit is off, right? But it's hard, but scheduling time and space for focus. The principle of power. Power has a lot to do with energy, obviously. And the thing that I touch on power is we tend to treat ourselves like we're batteries or like an iPhone. And what I mean by an iPhone is going to work 100% until the power's gone, and then it's off. Humans aren't like that. And when we engage people, we can't tell this person's at 30%, this person's at 40%, this person's at 70%. So it's really important for us to understand the energy that we have that we're engaging people with and the energy that they have. Because a lot of times when we're in conversation with people and the energy isn't right, and we judge them from what comes out their mouth, we knew the energy wasn't right to begin with. So we had to go back and look at the overall power in it before we allow our power to be charged up because we're offended by something that wasn't necessarily intended to have that reaction. Propulsion, and there's 7 of these, we're almost through here. So from a personal drive system, filtering your distractions, focusing on shifting your grind to a gear. A lot of people get into this as far as like just grinding, you gotta go at it, rawr, I think that creates a lot of unnecessary pressure and stress. I used to do it when I was working out, like, rawr, here, rawr, rawr. But it creates a lot of grind. And when we're talking about going out there grinding, for those of you who are kind of engineering, if gears grind, it causes heat, causes friction. Things break when they grind. So how can we peacefully find a way to shift in such a way that things are smooth? So moving that grind into a gear and things getting automated and find your flow. The periscope utilizes a series of mirrors and reflections to provide a view of area where we don't have a direct line of sight and allows us to see surface from a submerged position. In the book, this might get a little bit complex, but what I'm saying from a periscope is because it uses different mirrors to see at a higher level, there might be certain things in my life that I can't see, but Jerry can. And if I can allow Jerry to be a mirror to help reflect a situation that I'm looking at, but I'm looking at it head on. The periscope allows me to maintain my position, but to look at it at a higher level. And a lot of times in society, we can't get out of what we're looking at directly. We can't see that higher level. The periscope allows me to set my sights above the surface of what I'm dealing with, underneath the surface, and just rise to a greater position so I have a improved mindset. And it shows here paradigm, sculpting your reality. Goes into more depth with the book, but I just love the periscope. And going back to that initial thing about platform, we stabilize the platform, meaning if you're emotional about something, it's very difficult to have an accurate view of what's going on. Two more left. The ping and the pulse. The ping and the pulse is about sending more meaningful signals, searching blind spots, searching connectivity, and separating the noise. I think one of the most important things that I have in the book is 6 questions to separate the voices from the noises. Because there's a lot of time that there's noise in our situation, and we're responding to it when we need to understand what the actual voices are. And sometimes the voices can be noisy. We just need to remove the noise and say, okay, here's what that person is trying to say. And this is last but not least, I love this thing here, positive buoyancy. What I hope for society, what we can do, and what a submarine does, is it almost looks like it's not possible for this huge metal ship to go down in the ocean and then all of a sudden rise. So how all of a sudden are we breaking these rules of science? How are we taking metal and water and just making it into this bubble? A submarine has the ability to reach into these small tanks, these reservoirs, and expand air rapidly. And by rapidly expanding air, it's able to change the material condition of a submarine, so when it's in a depressed state, it has the ability to rise. We have to have pockets of goodness, of happiness, of release that allow us to rise in difficult situations. Have you ever watched something or been in a situation where you're like, man, this is just way too much? Right? I've had situations where you're right, I should be upset about it, but I'm not in an upset mood right now. I don't want to go there. So I just need to rise above it and just deal with that later. And this whole positive buoyancy is about making sure that you develop an emotional balance and you're driving positive outcomes. All this stuff ties back to where our base is, where our purpose is. If you think of a ship lifting and listing, listing is where you're leaning over to the side, right? And lifting is, right, the actual lift of a submarine. And what we tend to find is people are just listing a little bit, not sitting straight up, but just listing a little bit because they're waiting to be straightened up by something that they're missing in their lives. And the positive buoyancy chapter just really brings that last piece in about understanding your emotional load, what are you carrying, following steps to reorganize. The 7 steps of the Relentless Rise can be a coaching guide, right? It could be something that you can use to teach yourself. Basically what I did for my opportunity in the submarine and also in the corporate environment was create this guide that could help people with coaching. I myself am not actively coaching, but it's a great tool. Throughout the book, multiple tips to help people have a more uplifted life. So at the end of the day, if there's one thing, I guess the final thing in closing before I take questions, is there's this nature amongst submariners that we're going to make it to the surface. And I'm sure for Gary, my colleague here, I've never met one submariner who didn't think we were going to make it back. We've had some harrowing situations. They call away, I saw Gary's eyes here. There are situations, it's a really unique feeling when you're in a submarine and you're dealing with a type of casualty and you realize, man, you know, about 120 of us right now could just go just like that. I wish I could speak about those in more detail, but I would say if there's one thing about those situations, it's the fact that you have this pressure with everybody in the submarine that we're going to make it to the surface, that we're in a difficult spot right now, but we're going to make it to a higher place. So that is the conclusion of my presentation. I'll open it up to questions. I hope I didn't bounce around too much.
So how long, what's the longest you've been underwater submerged?
A little bit over 100. Without sunlight, I didn't keep track of it. And I hate to say this, I know it sounds crazy, I loved it.
Several months.
I loved it, yeah. To be able to, when we popped up in the middle of the ocean, that might be one of the best feelings that I had in my life, to swim in the middle of the ocean. And for those of you who know with Shark Call, they get the person up there with the M16, just in case any sharks come.
Probably more dangerous than the shark.
Yeah. But for some veterans, I mean, the American flag in the middle of the ocean with 24 nuclear missiles, and you're barbecuing, smoking cigars. It's
You're barbecuing on a submarine?
What they call Steel Beach. They call it Steel Beach. They bring up a barrel, one of those black barrels. They bring up one of those, put it on the top. It's pretty fun. They've got pictures of it. If you look online, you'll see some pictures. None of me, but you'll see. It's an amazing feeling to swim in the middle of the ocean.
Wow, yeah.
Yes, sir.
You know, haven't been in the military, but been around the military, the culture within the military, and yet confined space in a submarine. I would suspect that some of these challenges are not strictly allocated to NCOs and enlisted on a submarine. It also impacts senior leaders of submarines. What's the check and balance? Is it other officers helping other officers on the submarine if they notice a little dip in depression, or is
Sure.
everybody?
I guess it comes down to leadership. But for me, USS Kentucky 737 Blue under Captain Roy Harkins had 5 incredible patrols of people who were there for each other. And there were just, I don't remember any like negatives or where the crew's blown up or someone's in protest. If there was someone who wasn't with it, there are different conversations that you have with somebody like that. And we just tell people, I mean, when the hatch closes, it's a different ball game. We'd like to talk it out, but we're going to eventually get you to go along. Yeah.
Cool.
The hatch is closed, right? Yes, sir.
Just the balance of work and play.
Uh-huh.
What did you do to, just have that other side of
Sure.
entertainment or personal time, or, what were some examples of that?
Reading, a lot of reading, just to get one of the things that was important, like I read the Bible cover to cover without interruption or with any, just to understand it. I don't want people to think like I'm a religious, but to understand like the book, the context. Do I believe in it? I was raised Catholic, but like, do I believe in it? Conversations filled a lot. Really, really good conversations with people sitting. There's not a lot of emotion. You could have some very, very fueled conversations that would scare people on the surface, but you're just not going to get mad under it, because what are you going to do, right? So when you would ask for people, this is how I was raised, blah, 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 and you ask people how they really feel, for me in a submarine, people would tell you. And that meant everything. There were movies and stuff like that, so you could watch movies, you could play cards, you could play dominoes. Dominoes, we had to be careful if we were slamming too hard. Slam down. The Russians found you how well, so-and-so had domino, he slammed it. It was like bones. But the number one pastime, we're kind of geeks. So when you get off watch and someone's about to do a procedure that no one's seen before, everyone wants to rush to that procedure, because then you become the guy or the person. I apologize, it wasn't integrated when I was in. Now it's both men and women on submarines. But when I served, I mean, everyone wanted to find a problem, because if you fixed it, you were the...
It was new.
Oh yeah. But the people who were just like your machine nuts, if you would, they were the heroes. Everybody wanted to figure out, okay, how do you lock wire that? How do you turn that? How do you put the O-ring in? We just really, really got into taking care of the submarine.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
From a woman's question. What were their sleeping quarters like?
So there's good question. The sleeping quarters almost looks like a U, and they're 9. They're 9 bunks. So there's the bottom, the middle, and the top. The mattresses are probably about that, right? And they sit on these metal pans, and you lift up the metal pan, and underneath there you have maybe about 4 or 5 inches of stuff, and all your personal space goes there in that tray, in that area. Being very fortunate being on a ballistic submarine, because they kind of say we have a lot more room than than the fast attacks. But nothing's wrong with being on the Cadillac. So enjoyed it. But sleeping quarters were,
Tight.
yeah, they were tight and unique, because everyone has different types of sleeping things, and you had to be mindful of that. If you had to get somebody up, that's what you just need to be aware of, because everyone doesn't wake up happy. So you have to tell, if you're going to reach in and, hey, you need to get up, you're late for watch. Just kind of do that at your own.
But your bunk was yours, you didn't hot bunk?
Fortunately not, I didn't have to. But if you do, yeah,
Make
it
sure
wouldn't have
you're
been an
clean.
issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't have to hop on.
I have a question too. We can kind of understand much of what you're talked about. We're adults, most of us been in the military, it makes sense. I have a family with a young boy, 8th grade kind of, who's struggling. How would I approach using some of what you're talking about to even just start an effort to try and help a young boy?
I really do think it will help, I really
How would you
do
approach
think.
it?
I would approach it starting with the base and understanding where people stand and being very, very mature about that situation. Here's what somebody believes in. And the reason why a lot of people don't get to the base is because you have to deal with somebody who I don't believe or agree in everything that the people who I worked with believed in, but I respected enough to help them create a structure so it was with them along, the way throughout patrol. So I would start that. It's a cycle. You start with the base. You have your mission. So your
Was that
mission.
just listening to them?
Listening to them coaching sessions. So I would use a coaching structure, and I'm probably leaning a little bit more into my HR experience for that. You might have small groups where everybody could talk about certain things, but when you're focusing on somebody one-to-one, then I would use the submarine technique and do the best to get that face-to-face interaction. I have a 13-year-old son, so we could talk. We could compare notes. It's going all right. It's going all right.
Part of that answer might come from your mother too.
Yes. Yeah. There's certain principles that I stuck with. Yeah, she's.
Certain responsibilities, and when you teach your children these certain responsibilities, then that makes a person out of them.
Yes, sir. Yep. Honor, courage, commitment, everything that I talked about, hopefully it goes back to my mother,
Yep.
right? Because she was the one who just invested so much in making sure that I understood that I was.
I got that from what you said, yes.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. Are you asking or are you confirming?
I was asking.
Okay. Was it?
Okay.
Okay.
No, oh, sorry, if he was done, first off, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fascinating
Yeah.
layout of, what you presented here.
And I should have asked, I apologize before. What's your name?
Sorry, Matt Norton.
Hey, Matt. Thank you.
Welcome to Broomfield.
Thank you, Matt.
Do you present to, so you're doing this here for the veterans group. Do you present to like at corporate levels, or
I have.
are you available for that kind of for like a more of a like a field operations?
Sure,
team?
sure,
Okay.
sure. Yeah. What happened was, can we pause the stream?
Sure. Oh, yeah, we can, Bob, why don't you cut off the stream, then I think we're done.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go.
No. I just want to say something. I don't want people to take it the wrong way because.